and the candidates, there's Hustings, where the County Councillor hopefuls have the opportunity to present themselves and their views to the public. There are 5 candidates for the 2 councillor seats. All were invited to attend this meeting, but regrettably 2 have not been able to be here today. The format of this Hustings meeting will be as follows. Firstly, I will introduce each of the candidates and invite them to say a few words about themselves. I will then table 5 questions prepared in advance of this meeting. Each candidate was sent the 5 questions last week, so have had time to consider and prepare their answers. The questions were drawn from suggestions from the public. The same question will be put to each candidate in turn. For the first 4 questions, they will have up to 2 minutes for their response. The 5th question is more wide-ranging, and we're allowing each candidate up to 5 minutes for their answer. As I was aware that some candidates might not be able to attend, I invited them to submit the responses that we received. At the end of these 5 pre-prepared questions, I shall invite a few questions from the floor, which I hope will cover some of the many issues and concerns which have not already been discussed. In the interest of even-handedness, please only ask questions which can be answered by all candidates. I'll be asking you to raise your hand if you have a question you would like to put to the panel. I'm afraid we don't have a portable microphone tonight, so I would ask you to please speak clearly. I will repeat the question for the benefit of the panel and all members of the audience. This event is being filmed and recorded, and technology permitting is being streamed on Facebook Live, and the recording will be uploaded to YouTube. I mention this because although we won't be training the camera on you, your voice might be recognisable. Once the question and answer session has concluded, the bar at the rear of the hall will open, and I hope some of you, including the candidates, will take some refreshment, and that this might allow the opportunity for further informal discussions. So the 2 candidates who haven't been able to attend are Bob Andrews and Christine Branford, and I'll introduce from my left. We have Anthony Watts, Corinna Kenyon-Wade, and Angelique Williams. So from the left, perhaps you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Anthony Watts. I've been a resident of Knighton for about 22 years. We live on the top of the hill at Gwenaffel Farm. Jim and Bodnam used to farm there before ourselves. It's a small holding now, no longer a working farm, but we rear rare breed animals ourselves. We moved here with the vision of bringing up a family in a rural community, and that's exactly what we've done. It's been a fantastic experience for ourselves and a wonderful place to bring up our children. My background has been in the corporate world. I've worked for Nike for 15 years, a sports brand. I was also a territorial soldier in Hereford, which was a fantastic, it's introduced me to this whole area, the Brecon Beacons. And I've worked for a family business within the care home services provision in Oxfordshire, and latterly worked with a very large affordable housing scheme in Oxfordshire. And now I'm focusing all my efforts in giving back to the community, hopefully.
Thank you.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the Community Centre for putting this on. It's nerve-wracking, but it's very good to have debate. So firstly, a bit about me. We moved to Cuckoo's Nest in 2000, so yes, 22 years ago. We did the renovation work ourselves and still grow most of our own fruit and vegetables and rear some livestock as we wanted to grow and rear our own food. Many people may know that I've been running a small business as a potter. I have also been working in the Herefordshire Library Service. But my most recent employment has been as field interviewer for the Office for National Statistics. And this has enabled me to meet a complete cross-section of the population living here in Powys. Through the surveys I would be conducting, often for the Welsh Government, I would ask people I met quite searching or personal questions, such as their access to healthcare or rates of pay. And I found this work really interesting. So why am I standing? Working with the public has made me aware of social issues and inequalities of access, say to healthcare or education or job opportunities. For instance, I found out through my interviewing that in the last couple of years in Newtown has had only 3 doctors in their GP practice, when because of their size, they should have had 8 doctors, leading up to a 7-week wait to see a doctor for a non-urgent appointment. Meanwhile, in Llanrindod, satisfaction with the surgery was high. What gave rise to these inequalities? And why did Knighton lose a GP practice to Clun? We have to be vigilant to protect the services we do have. Why am I standing as a Liberal Democrat candidate? This party fits with my internationalist values and I admire its stance on green issues. It is also the largest opposition party on Powys County Council. In the May elections, I would like the Lib Dems to take control to bring about much needed change. A more open, accountable council, better connected with the public. And I want to contribute towards the formation of a strong and effective opposition to the current government in Westminster, and to help provide a greater level of scrutiny that is so obviously needed.
Thank you very much. Angelique.
Good evening, everybody. I am Angelique Williams, otherwise known as Ange. I have been brought up and lived in Knighton and District for the whole of my life, so that's 54 years. So whether you class me local, some would, some wouldn't. I've known people that say, you know, you've got to be here forever to be local. I've been a hairdresser. I've worked on end-of-life care. I've been a cook. I've been a waitress. I've been a barmaid. Pretty much anything to make a living, really, because not having a degree and having been to university, like most of the members in town, we know all about having to earn a living very hardly. I'm independent. As my husband will tell you, I will not be told what to do. It isn't something that sits very well with me at all. I fight for Knighton. I don't fight for a political party. I don't always fight for what's best for Powys. I try and fight for what is best for Knighton, to get funds here, which we have had a lot of over the last few years. And over the last few years, I can only call on my experience as having been the county councillor for that long to inform you of what goes on. I think I'm very approachable. Everybody seems to be able to email me, talk to me, and 99% of things that they email me or talk to me about are actually solved that day, because I'm very lucky to have a very good and cooperative team in Llanrindod. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angelique. So now we move on to the pre-prepared questions. As I say, all the candidates have had a chance to see these questions. They will have 2 minutes each. I have some written responses from a candidate who can't be here. So I think perhaps we'll reverse the order and I'll put the question first to Angelique and then we'll work our way across. So the question is, how would you work towards improving the provision of and access to affordable housing?
Well, the main question is, what is affordable housing? What is affordable to our community is not affordable to other communities. I think social housing is equally as important as affordable housing. Unfortunately, a lot of people that live in this town will never be able to afford their own home. It's not something that I like to say. It's something that part of me is embarrassed about. The wages in this area are not good enough for young families to be able to afford to buy their own property. When it comes to building affordable homes, all we can do is ask the developer to have a certain amount of those properties at a rate that is affordable for town. But again, what is affordable for town? 80,000, 100,000, 150,000. And all the people out there with money that can walk in and buy 2 £80,000 homes will do so, because that's what they're doing now. It doesn't mean that they're not local. It doesn't mean that they don't have a right to be in town, but it does take that affordability away from our youngsters. So for me, the way forward would be to have social housing with the ability to be able to buy maybe after a certain amount of time. I have had discussions, and at this time in town, if a council property comes up for sale, we are buying them back so that there are properties available for young families to have a reasonable rent in a reasonable state building. I would like to be able to say I could cure that problem by either upping wages or lowering the price of our housing at the moment. Unfortunately, I can't.
Okay, thank you very much. Same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Please do.
Please do. Okay. How would you work towards improving the provision of and access to affordable housing?
Well, I would use the upcoming review of the local development plan. I would press for the maximum proportion of affordable homes to be built in any development. It is acknowledged that at the moment, insufficient small to medium energy efficient homes are being built. I would also use council resources to maximise development of new homes to rent. Just as Angelique has been saying, many young people can't afford to live in the area they grew up in. There have been very few homes built in Knighton in the last 10 years, and lots of people from outside of the area have been moving into Powys because of the pandemic means that they can work from home. And this has pushed house prices up by over 15% in the last year. So the average house price is now £240,000 in Powys. The definition of affordable housing is actually 80% of the average market price. So that brings it down to about 190,000. While canvassing recently, I met a lady whose daughter, a primary school teacher, had to move to Wigmore to get a decent starter home at just under 190,000. Similarly, there's been a desperate need for good quality social rental properties. The council has been upgrading its housing stock by retrofitting external cladding in Glendower, in Nuckless and Radnor Drive here, but much more could be done. Rather than retrofitting, new council housing should be built. There is an excellent development in Sarn, the first council housing to be built in Powys for 30 years, and it was opened last year, 2021. 7 small houses for social or subsidised rents made from locally sourced timber, each with solar panels and heat recovery systems. So they'll be very fuel efficient and, I've gone over. Have I gone over?
That's 2 minutes.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
I think we just keep the discipline.
Okay, fair enough.
Anthony, would you like to take the question again?
I think I can go on. We'll go on and read.
Fine. Okay. How would you work towards improving the provision of and access to affordable housing?
Okay. Well, firstly, I'd work with the portfolio managers in the council who are given the responsibility for housing. But the important thing that both of the other 2 candidates have mentioned is the need for low cost housing, whether that's social rents or affordable 80% market rate housing. The secret to affordable housing I've found from my experiences in Oxfordshire is to have a mix of provision. Now the council they have a thing called Vision 2025 where they're going to build 250 council houses by 2025. There are about 118 units that are planned in the planning process or through the planning process ready to be built. Some of those that you mentioned, Karina just mentioned. So they're still only halfway through that. So they've got to ramp that up to reach that target of 2025. That's council housing. You then got affordable provision through housing associations. Now, the problem we've got there is there are plenty of housing associations who I've worked with in the past who would love to come and build here. One of the problems we've got, which hasn't been highlighted yet, is phosphates. Phosphates are starting to block up the planning process, and that's a real threat. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that later on when we talk about IPUs, intensive poultry units. But that's something we've got to work towards so that we can actually provide those housings through both the council provision, which already has planning, and future affordable housing providers. There's also independent developers and ensuring that as part of the 106 process, they have to provide affordable housing with the mix. So if they have a site where they're gaining 20 units, a proportion of those, and in Oxfordshire, that's 35%. I don't believe that's anywhere near that high in Powys. I think it's between 10 and 20%. Has to be dedicated and affordable provision by that independent provider. So you've got council housing, housing associations and independent providers, and we've got to work with all of those to provide the houses that we need to build sustainable communities.
Thank you very much. And I have a written response to the same question from Bob Andrews. How would you work towards improving the provision of and access to affordable housing? The response: Powys County Council has made a commitment to construct 250 additional homes to rent in Powys from last year. In order to maintain affordable housing requirements, the County Council needs to undertake a working partnership with the Welsh Assembly and housing associations to define its housing hotspots and requirements within the county. If I was elected, I would make this a priority within the housing section at County Hall. We have the second question, which I will read out, and perhaps Anthony will reverse the order if you wouldn't mind responding to that. Same sort of area. Many houses in the area are poorly insulated and/or are hard to heat. Many households risk falling into fuel poverty. What measures would you seek to implement in order to address this matter?
Well, this is a complicated and going to be a long process because we have a huge housing stock which is not fit for purpose, particularly with the challenges of increasing utility bills and the comfort for those individuals living there. I would work with council members to continue pushing to achieve net zero with its own organisation by 2030. And that includes its housing stock from the 250 units that I mentioned earlier. So ensuring that the standards of building regulations for those properties meet the highest standards possible, which include solar panel provision, ground source heat pumps and so forth, air source heat pumps, to ensure that those homes are adequate and well heated at affordable prices. Retrofitting properties is more costly and more complicated. However, there has to be a programme. I think the council has a responsibility to signpost people to funding from central government at Wales with Warm Homes England, or Warm Homes Wales, and ensuring that people are accessing those. Currently, there is marketing within Facebook and other social media to ensure that people are made aware of those, but the council has a responsibility to ensure that anybody who claims benefits and fits within that threshold are accessing those very valuable assistance to put technologies on their roof or insulate the walls to their homes. So it is a signposting issue. It is also ensuring that their own stock of housing is up to scratch, so leading by example.
Fine, thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Liberal Democrats are committed to ending energy leaks from buildings, which account for a staggering 29% of all carbon emissions. The County Council can do several things, and if the Liberal Democrats were in control, they would propose the following: retrofit all housing on the council asset list at the cost of £21,000 to £27,000 per property. This would ease fuel poverty and add to the core actions to achieve net zero for Powys by 2030, just as Anthony said, just 8 years away. We also need to provide grants to help private homeowners and landlords achieve better insulation and move towards retrofitting their properties too. There is help for those currently on benefits, such as the Welsh Government Nest scheme. Talking again about the new passive house development in Sarn that we've all been mentioning, these 250, the project for these 250 council homes, which need almost no heat inputs. They have solar panels, a mechanical heat, mechanical heat recovery. Thank you very much. But retrofitting for older properties is also effective. Some case studies show that after internal or external cladding, loft insulation, LED lighting, installation of photovoltaic solar panels and batteries to store the energy creates by the panels, older homes can be made carbon neutral. Here at the COM, the Citizens Advice Bureau funded Gary Cowell to give energy saving and insulation advice for a period, but that funding has now stopped. There are also,
You've got 2 sentences.
yes, there are also other energy advice companies that will give free advice to help retrofit your home. And I mentioned the Welsh Government's scheme Nest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Angelique, I'll repeat the question for the benefit of the audience as well. Many houses in the area are poorly insulated or are hard to heat, and many households risk falling into fuel poverty. What measures would you seek to implement in order to address this matter?
Well, unfortunately, being in a market town, a lot of us have very old properties, and very old properties are very difficult to insulate. You can do internal insulation. There is funding for internal insulation, and for roof insulation. Again, I know people that have got loft spaces that they can hardly put their hand through, let alone get insulation up into. You might have a staircase that's really hard if you do internal insulation to get up and down, because it takes off so much space on the side of the staircase. In theory, outside external insulation would be best, but not everybody wants their house clad. You know, some of us, myself being, live in a very old 14th century property, and I would not want to put it on the outside of my property for historic value, if nothing else. Again, I feel like the way to go is to reduce the bills for people, if at all possible. Air heat source pumps are very good. They're very, very cheaply run. You can keep the house at a basic 18 degrees all year round if you want to, and then just top up very lightly. I personally feel that everywhere should have solar panels to bring down the electricity bills as much as possible. That is something that I've asked for all of our council properties, because we have had gas lines put in for them to be able to use gas heating. Anybody on the council estates that wanted a gas boiler could have a free gas boiler put in and it directly given to the property. There you are, I'm out of time.
Thank you very much. And Bob Andrews has submitted an answer to the same question regarding poor insulation and hard to heat. Most people are currently worried about energy costs. There are grants available for loft, internal and cavity walls, depending on the house construction. Although grants are available, these are mostly advertised online. Not everyone in our communities has access to online technology. Therefore, an advertising campaign from the County Council should be cascaded down to community councils and relevant organisations to assist the public. Question 3, I'll start with Corinna. The sole remaining dentist practice in Knighton is no longer accepting new NHS patients. How would you seek to improve access to NHS dentistry?
Well, luckily, there is an example of where this has actually happened recently. Landrindod Wells Town Council, together with their Senedd member, Jane Dodds, did a survey of residents in Landrindod Wells and submitted this evidence to the Powys Teaching Health Board, and they submitted it to a Welsh Government minister, and they have actually got funding for a NHS dental practice in their town, and this was in the newspapers last month. So maybe everybody here has a dentist, I don't know, but I certainly have struggled to get dental help in this town. You probably do know someone who is struggling to find a dentist. even if they're willing to pay for private care. So what I would do if I were elected is I would conduct a survey. I would follow this blueprint that Andrindle Town Council have developed. I'd survey residents of the town and provide evidence and take that to the Powys Teaching Health Board. And
that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anthony.
I would look at this probably slightly differently. Although it's not a direct responsibility, the provision for dentistry by the county council, it's clearly an important provision for the community to have. And as Karina said, you know, there are definitely people who would have access or should have access to NHS dentistry who are not getting it. So it's clearly a problem. I would agree that it would be good to establish the numbers, but I think that even anecdotally, I know enough people that would warrant, you know, us encouraging further dentists to effectively come to this area to provide that dentistry work. And I think this comes back to retaining a community which is viable. And this goes for GP services, this goes for social care services, this goes for school teachers. We've got to have a vibrant community that can survive for the future, for our future generations. So it's much bigger than just about dentistry provision, although that's a specific question. You know, we need to provide housing which is affordable. We need to provide the schools that these families who are dentists, doctors, teachers, social care workers will come to this community rather than having to commute or take children miles away to other schools. So I think it's a bit of a holistic answer to this question, this problem. But I think as a community, we'd certainly need to come together to establish the numbers. And then, as Karina said, to press the health board to actually help us provide better provision and more dentists in this community.
Thank you very much. Angelique.
Well, I rang up my dentist, who's the local Knighton NHS dental provider. And I was lucky enough to speak to the area manager, actually, when I rang, who happens to be somebody that I know. And I said, as your councillor, how do you think I could help you actually access and retain some more NHS dentists? Her answer to me was, train as one. I cannot find a trained dentist to come here in Powys, in her area. Knighton has 1.5 dentists. Landod has 1.5 dentists. Newtown has 2. Welshpool has 1. Those are the practices that she is in charge of. She is looking for 4 dentists. She said any dentist would do. The main problem at the moment is in the training that they've had. For the last 2 years, they haven't looked into anybody's mouth. They might have qualified as a dentist, but they have no practical experience whatsoever. So the new dentists coming through are having to do extra training so that they can actually get a job as a qualified dentist. I agree. We all desperately need professional people in this area. There isn't one whole answer to it. Unfortunately, just raising money isn't the only way it's going to happen. A lot of people want to stay near the college that they've trained in or around because they have partners in that area. A lot of them have medical partners and they want to be near a general hospital. So if they're married to a doctor or a nurse or another professional, they have the opportunity to work in the same area as them.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
And again, I have a written answer from Bob Andrews about the dentistry. The dentistry issue is not only within Powys, but it's a nationwide problem. The Welsh Assembly needs to work with the health boards to train more people in the NHS dentistry system. One option is to have NHS mobile dental units visiting certain areas until more dentists can be trained up. School mobile dental units could also be implemented to check and care for our children. I would support any action that would enable our communities to receive the dental care that is required. Right, so question 4. The departure of the UK from the European Union and from the Common Agricultural Policy is likely to change the nature of the rural economy, and farms are seeking to diversify their operations. How would you respond to planning applications for new intensive livestock units in the locality? And we'll go back to Angelique for that. Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, being a farmer's wife, this is a little bit of a difficult one for me. Not because I agree or disagree with it, but because I know most of the people that come to me for planning. I try to help both sides is all I can say. I do tend to sit on the fence because I don't want to be accused of being biased in either direction. If somebody comes to me for a reference, which they have done, and I have done quite a few of them, I will give a reference truthfully as to my ability of what I know about them and their business. Equally, I've helped Sustainable Food Knighton, and I have spoken with them and written letters and emails off for them as they're really fighting against poultry units is what it comes down to. Personally, 4 and 5 go together to me. If you can't keep your family in your business in this area in a farm, they will move away. So that also cuts out part of the local economy. You might say that I'm biased, which I am, because I like my children working at home, but that is the honest truth. A farm cannot afford, like they used to have 2 or 3 children working at home and have 3 or 4 households off one income. And so I deal with it fairly. Whoever asks me to do anything for them, I will do. But I do not go to planning meetings. I do go for other things, and I have been for other things. But when it comes to the actual planning of chicken sheds, I do not go to the meeting because I feel I would not want to be biased on either side. Okay.
Thank you very much. That's 2 minutes. Let's go to Anthony next, if I may. Do you want the question again?
No, I think I can take that from there, if that's right. I would start by saying that strong rural economies are essential to creating and sustaining a vibrant community. So we have to, the planning process has to support the economic development within our region. As Angelique pointed out, you know, we have to have a vibrant economy here, and that does include farming of all types, and more recently, intensive units, poultry and pig. However, the important issue is the standards that these are managed at, and in particular managing pollutants such as ammonia, pollutants such as phosphates, which have become an issue across the whole of the UK. They themselves are starting to block up the planning process as rivers are increasing with pollutants and increasing algae growth within those rivers. Now, one thing that's clear or unclear actually is quite whether it's solely down to intensive farming or other farming techniques, or where the pollutants are coming from. So I would certainly support further studies of where these pollutants are coming from. And what's very important with the planning process is that a lot of significance is given to the location of intensive units. I think that is where the compromise lies. High standards, managing any pollutants, for example, taking phosphates to other parts of the country where they can be used to fertilize land, which struggles and needs phosphates. So removing them, processing them, and actually selling them on. Phosphates to purchase in other parts of the country are very, very expensive. So we can actually turn a byproduct, or rather turn a waste product into a byproduct used elsewhere. We have to ensure that we keep the noise and the smell from these units away from local populations, schools, housing, hospitals, and so forth. And so it's very important that we manage the process, but I certainly would support intensive farming within those parameters where we can ensure that we take account of all the issues that arise from their existence.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Corinna.
Much like Anthony, I would support a full study of the effects of intensive livestock farming and also our sewerage system, because both contribute to pollution events, as seen on our River Wye. As a result of these pollution events, there has been a block of all new built development. That means housing too. Without extensive testing, you don't know what the source of the phosphates, the nitrates, whatever is. You don't know whether it's from a poorly aligned sewerage pipe or from a pig unit or poultry unit. So I don't know if anybody's heard of citizen science testing of the Lug and the Upper Wye. There is now a scheme whereby the team is being tested downstream, and I would certainly support that. I would want a map to be made of any sources of pollution, and this would take place over a year, so I would stay any developments until that year had elapsed.
Thank you very much. And we have a written response again from Bob Andrews, the question regarding intensive livestock units. This would depend on each planning application received. Farms have already diversified in powers with various livestock units. It would also depend on the local environment where the units may be sited. I would also add, I do not support farms being sold to major corporate companies who wish to plant trees to offset their carbon footprints. Fine, so if you bear with me. So we now have 5 minutes, although candidates may not have 5 minutes worth of things they want to say, but it's a longish question, so I'll try and read it out once, and then if any candidates want it read again, I shall do so. Knighton and the Upper Team Valley are relatively remote from national infrastructure, with limited local opportunities for young people. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 requires public authorities to work towards creating prosperous, resilient, equal, healthy, cohesive, culturally vibrant, and globally responsible communities. With these aims in mind, what measures would you pursue to encourage young people and young families to stay, live, and work within the catchment area? We'll start with Corinna, if I may.
So, as part of my job for the Office for National Statistics, I recently interviewed a man living near Lambista who said he couldn't see his children, currently 8 and 10, staying in the area where he had been born. When he looked at the local development plan, there was not enough affordable housing. Although the local primary school was good, he had heard poor reports of Landrindod Wells High School. With the pub and the village shop shutting, there was a general sense that his community was dying. As an interviewer, you hear this quite a lot, and although Knighton is a bigger place, it has similar challenges. Starting with education, the Lib Dems would fight to keep small rural schools such as Lambista open, such as Dolly open. Sending local children who live near each other to 5 or 6 different schools, such as that happened in Beguildy after the school closed, breaks the community down. Youth groups are also really important. There can be a difficulty with getting into drugs and trouble with nothing for teenagers to do and few opportunities. The one here at the Com is great, but it's hard to secure funding. The Lib Dems would support youth groups. The Lib Dems would also fight to improve sixth form education. Too many of our young people have to travel long, costly distances into England, Hereford or Shrewsbury, to study subjects that would be the basis of their professional life, such as STEM subjects or sciences. Education would be delivered in a hybrid way using new technology. For instance, I met a young man from Newtown who had been unable to study a foreign language at sixth form level, willing as he was to travel to Welshpool. We also need more skills, more apprenticeships. I would ask successful local businesses what skill shortages they had and try to supply those courses and those apprenticeships locally, liaising with local and Welsh government. For instance, the Powys Teaching Health Board has a rural academy whereby they're trying to train nurses here. It's got a few teething problems, but that's a great idea. There's a chronic difficulty with recruiting professional healthcare staff and other professionals to this area. We need a broad base of skills in the area, and we also need professional job for these people's partners, and we need good schools in the area to attract these people. And we need to grow our own businesses here. I'd like to see a provision of small business units here in Knighton or elsewhere up the valley to provide spaces to start startups and light engineering. These businesses need to be well supported for a period of time with grants and information. And it can happen here. There's a hydrogen car making initiative in Landrin Dodd Wells called River Simple. And a last idea, horticulture. There's an initiative around Abergavenny whereby just small plots of land are rented, 2 to 3 acres are rented to, say, a young couple, and through regenerative farming methods, they're able to supply the local area with veg boxes, eggs, meat, etc. So that's work for young people. And lastly, we need affordable homes and open pubs.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to break up the rhythm, I'll read out the response from Bob Andrews. So just to remind you, with the aims of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, what measures would you pursue to encourage young people and young families to stay, live and work within the catchment area? Within Knighton, we have many organisations that are able to relate to the Act for the well-being of its residents. But we also require small starter business units and office space to create employment opportunities and economic growth, which are vital for our communities. This is something I would like to pursue. Powys County Council also needs to implement work experience schemes for our younger generation, leading to potential apprenticeships. Again, this is something I would very much like to pursue. Angelique, would you like to hear the question again, or you're happy?
I'm fine.
Fine? Okay, so 5 minutes.
Thank you. Really, I think it all stems from education. Small schools, large schools, mostly schools and universities. We need to bring our education closer to us. The group that I work with have an idea of altering school ages so that children can stay in a smaller community while they're younger. Even if a small, very small school can be run from a village hall, just so that those children can stay together and grow up together before they have to move on. Maybe moving on to a middle school at 8 or 9 to a larger school so that they're not thrown in at a very young age into a large, busy place that they're not used to. Secondary schools at the moment, I'm told, are being sorted out. I doubt it very much because they're going to cost us an immense amount of money with what's been proposed so far. I personally am very much against basically paying £34 million a year in interest alone to get the secondary school sorted out. But, you know, perhaps other people think that that's a good amount of money to spend on interest. Yeah, school models are the main thing. We can do more online, especially if we've got youth clubs for the children to go to so that they can get their they need social activity. So if they can get the social activity to youth club and work online on the subjects that they need to work online at, maybe that is better than them traveling. I feel it is, but you know, that's up to them. Obviously, mobile signal in this area is horrendous. That needs to be looked at. Not everybody can get a mobile signal, and if you are working in a lot of these areas, you might need it to be able to send your work off. Broadband, again, is the same. The broadband is very bad. I have been working with a company to try and encourage people to look into their broadband and get new broadband services to town. Really, it's a general overall picture of making it lighter and brighter for everybody, making people want to stay. They've got to want to stay. You can't force them to stay. If you give them good schools for their children, if they've got good doctors and they can get a job, they'll stay, because 90% of them want to. Otherwise, half the country wouldn't want to move here to live with us. You know, again, I've got down here apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are starting to become a big thing now, which is great. Obviously, there's a lot of rules and regulations around them to make sure that the staff are safe. But in the big companies that we've got locally, they're working really well. We have a lot of them working down, say, for instance, with Will Watkins down at Hustings. They have a lot of apprenticeships down there. We have social service apprenticeships in Paris. We have NHS apprenticeships in Paris. We even have computer apprenticeships for technology, if that's what people want, if they don't want to go to uni. Again, I think personally that some of our post-16 education should be linked to universities. I know that my son is going to Newtown and they're linked with Swansea University so that they can get hold of university lecturers from home if they need to. They can actually do a university degree just by doing so many days in university a month, which brings down the cost of that university grant that they might need to have from 20, 30, 40, 50,000. You know, they might only be spending 1 or 2 nights away from home instead of living away from home, which is keeping them in the area. There are lots of things I'd like to do more of, lots of things I've started, and talking to people I find is the best way through that, asking them how you can help.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Anthony, do you like to do
No,
the
I
question
can
again?
start.
Fine.
I think I'll take a little different angle on this and look at different, an outsider after 22 years still. What attracted us to come here is probably the same that will keep the young stay here, which is one key word: community. It's exactly what we're doing here tonight. This is a community meeting for you to listen to us and for us to listen to you. The key things around community, I think, are, for us, and certainly was initially what we were quite surprised about, was actually the friendliness of a community which knows each other and can share problems and solve problems together. Our community will always have issues around provision of housing, qualifications and professional people coming here to fill posts that we need filling. That will be an ongoing issue. It will never be solved by anybody at this table forever. It will always be ongoing. We'll need new, different professionals to come and provide different services. Like I said, the key thing for me is the word community and how we define that. So yes, it does include provision of affordable and economical to run and enjoyable to live in housing. That includes upgrading current provision. Obviously, there's more houses here that exist that were built many years ago that need significant improvement. So I'd agree with the panel on the ambition for all county councillors to work together. And that's the key word: community working together to provide those improvements to the homes, not the houses, the homes we live in. We go back to our homes after a hard day to relax, to get over, to be prepared for the next hard day. Education, we talked about. The key thing is stopping the closure of our rural schools, period. And I would fight tooth and nail, working with Faye Jones, James Evans at every level to ensure that we can fight to keep those schools open. And that means fighting sometimes people within my own group. if I was lucky enough to be elected as a Conservative member for Knighton and Begardy. So keeping education opportunities here, not just at primary, but secondary. I was talking just 2 days ago to a farmer's wife, and it was in the Begardy area. And she specifically said that, you know, the community was being torn apart effectively because of the loss of that school. It's catastrophic. There's no other word to describe it. The young farmers group was being affected as well, which has been a strong part of the community for many, many years, because children are going to school in other areas from their fellow residents. There are other children living locally. They're forming bonds with other people in other areas. We're losing that community. It's the only reason actually I wanted to stand, was to fight for the hospital provision, which at the moment is lacking, to fight for the retention of our rural schools, to fight for the provision of improved GP services, to improve the broadband connectivity so that actually when district nurses or midwives go to rural locations, they can actually get connection to call for help if they need it. The community will improve by county councillors, town councillors, community centre committee working together, hand in partnership, to fight for this community. Something that Angelique mentioned earlier. We be county councillors for the whole of the county, but there's times when you have to fight for your area within that county, this being Knighton and Beguildy. So, you know, I'm very much in the same vein there. I would be prepared to put it all on the line to fight for this community first and foremost, but obviously working in cooperation with other county councillors to achieve shared objectives and aims and improvements for all of our communities which make up Powys. You know, we have to obviously then come back to jobs, because it's one thing having educated children here. It's one thing having services here, but how do we retain our children with the aspiration to live here? Well, clearly they need broadband, because as most of us are working with these things and trying to work out and having the children, you know, 12-year-old children tell you how to use those things. We need the opportunities for new industry to come here. We need to improve and diversify farming. We there, okay? We need to bring new industries and we need to encourage them. So I would challenge the council on how do we do that? Do we have any opportunities to bring people off the beaten track to come and provide new industries for the 21st century that we're moving into?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, so now we're going to hand over to the floor. I have a question which I'm going to start the ball rolling, which was didn't arrive in time to be handed to the candidates, but I think is quite interesting. How important do the candidates think moving to green energy sources is? Is it important enough to support the building of more wind turbines in the locality? From my left, Anthony.
My personal preference is something that Angelique mentioned earlier as well, which is that every home should have solar panels. I think it's a very direct way of each home providing an offset to their own carbon footprint. Obviously, the government have reduced the VAT or got rid of the VAT on provision, but that's still too expensive, I believe. Wind turbines in themselves, I think, again, a bit like IPUs, intensive poultry farming or pig farming units. In the right location, I think there's an argument to have them. I think it's all about probably the location and the number. We have them here. But like I said, my personal preference would be for individual provision, black-celled solar panels for hot water and for electric provision on units. That's my preference, but I wouldn't outright object to them in the right location, but subject to significant oversight and review of the pros and cons within that location and for the benefit of the community.
Thank you. Verena.
I would build wind turbines if they were managed by the community for the community, so that the community would get direct benefit. I do realise that they can be noisy and upsetting if located in the wrong place near houses. And I have met people who feels that their own house price has been affected, you know, their resale price has been affected by the proximity. I feel that if we had more wind turbines, this would be normalised. And I think I would build them in the right place, but yeah.
Andrew.
Well, 79 wind turbines built on the outskirts of Bilth does provide 188,000 free homes with electricity. So if you're looking at it economically, yes, I would build them because everybody in Powys could have free electricity. Personally, I'm not keen on them. Living on a farm, we would be somewhere that could have them probably, and possibly make a lot of money out of them if we wanted to. Sometimes you've got to be above that and think of what other people want. Yeah, I think I would say yes to a certain amount in a certain place at the right time.
Thank you. Right. Do we have any questions from the floor? Anybody like to raise their hand? Karen. Okay, so how important is tourism to the local area and how would you develop it? Is that right? Yeah. So let's to Knighton and the surrounding area. Angelique.
It's very important. It's probably at least 40% of our economy. We now have farms and other houses that do bed and breakfast. They have rentals, and this is bringing money into the area. If they have the money from that, they can spend it in the local town. They can spend it on tyres. They can spend it in the supermarket. You know, they can help the community in that way. Also, I just love the area. I just think it's so beautiful that when you meet somebody and they tell you how wonderful it is, it gives you a buzz, it gives you a boost. And we need it. We really, really need these people to come to town. We really need the walkers to keep the footpaths open, whether you like footpaths or not.
Okay, I think the question was in two parts. Is that right? What would you do to encourage tourism? Is that the,
to encourage
part?
as well.
So it's kind of two parts.
Yeah, well, really, it's advertising, isn't it? There needs to be as much advertising for town as possible to get the community feel, because a lot of people want that when they come. I've sat in pubs and spoken to people that say, well, I'm coming back because everybody talks to me. I go down the street and everyone says hello. And where I live, I don't know anybody. They want that feeling. We need to emphasize what a great place it is that we live. Powys, Knighton, I think Knighton personally, should have a blog, should have a video, should have anything out there that tells people how wonderful we are, because we know they're going to want to come here and it will make an amazing difference to town, the more people that we get here.
Okay, thank you. If I may paraphrase, so do you think it's right that tourism is important for the local economy? And if you do, how would you encourage it further?
Well, absolutely. I know that glamping has grown up the valley, Team Valley. So there's a lot more people coming to Powys. Things like the Offers Dyke Centre, getting that running in the right way. That is the symbol of Knighton. Absolutely. And also some small shops depend on tourism. So yes, it's essential.
And ways to develop tourism further?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think a bit of a facelift for Knighton, and I think that would be part of grants from the council. Just make it even more pretty. It's got some lovely buildings here, great places, but we need to be able to renovate them.
Anthony.
Yeah, without a doubt, tourism is very important, but it could be more important. It could be more significant to the community in terms of revenue, in terms of new people coming to this area, in terms of people who come to the area visiting as tourists and actually fancy moving here or developing businesses here. One concern I do have, though, and I need to mention it, I don't know if people are aware, but the government in Cardiff are proposing the introduction of a tourism tax, which I think would go in the face of actually encouraging people to come here. I think anything that increases the cost to the community and doesn't directly benefit the community would be a negative impact on the growth of tourism in this area. So I would be working with other council members, if I was lucky enough to be elected, to try and ensure that we can lobby to ensure that doesn't happen. But tourism opportunities, yeah, I mean, we would increase. I think we should be encouraging more accommodation, because the accommodation needs to be here in sufficient numbers to increase the growth of tourism. People will naturally use the local pubs and restaurants and shops whilst they were here and spend further revenue, further money rather. One of my aims and ambitions on the back of my leaflet was to remove parking charges for the first 2 hours, because I think we need to do everything we can as a community to encourage people to visit and make it as simple and easy as possible. It's not a significant change in revenue or loss of revenue, but it just simplifies it for a visitor who's uncertain of the area they're coming to, and just that factor to make it simple. So yeah, I think we need to encourage more growth. It's an area of opportunity to grow our community to a more sustainable position and retain youngsters in that industry. It can be an exciting industry to work in, working on farms. We talked about that earlier with Angelique there, saying, about diversification. So, tourism is a relatively soft impact carbon footprint wise on a community like ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions? Chris? Okay, so the question was, how would the candidates seek to improve the dissemination of information, I suppose the cascading of information down from national and county down to local level? Is that fair enough? Yeah, okay. Let's start with Anthony.
I mean, myself and Angelique attended the Beguiled Community Council a week or so ago, and we both gave our commitment to attend that regular monthly meeting. I think that's the direct way, is to actually attend those meetings, the local town council here, but also Beguiled. We mustn't forget that we're now amalgamated with Beguiled, but they're as important. We can hear their issues directly, as well as actually passing information from county. It's a two-way communication. So, we would be getting useful information. I think we both enjoyed what we heard, Angelique, the other night, the issues that they face and the important issues to themselves. So definitely a two-way communication there, but that's a very good question and a point that we'll take.
I attended the Beguiled Community Council the month before, so I've got to get in there myself. There is a proposal by the Lib Dems that cabinet members from Powys County Council should attend every single community council at least once a year by Zoom. So that's a practical way of keeping in touch. I hope there is sufficient connectivity in Philindry Village Hall.
Okay. Angelique.
Well, I think the best way usually is to email the clerk, which is what I've done all the way through the 5 years that I have been on the committee. Unfortunately, 2 of those years, none of us have been able to sit together in a room and talk. But again, like Anthony said, communication goes 2 ways. So I wish to say no more on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any more questions? Ruth. So it's working, we're live. Excellent. Okay, fine. Jolly good. Okay, what would the candidates do to improve the local parks? Angelique?
Well, parks come under grants, I'm afraid, so it usually involves Powys County Council and the local community council or town council working together to get the grants to come through. There's a park manager, which can be spoken to at any time and will help if at all possible. At the moment, this I'm putting out there, but it's not unbiased in any way. We have a grant for 160,000 going in for the Offers Dyke Park. Depending on the cooperation we get from various other members of the community as to whether Knighton will get that grant. I hope that everyone will work together so that we are able to get it. But really it is, I hate to say, it's a town council issue. It's not a county council issue. Council just maintains them.
Thank you. Corinna?
Well, I've recently joined the litter picking group. I think that's my contribution. I understand that there's some problem with sand and broken glass mixed up in a children's play area. So, but there's reasonably good equipment that I know that local people have got together and afforded the children's play area.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Alison?
Can I just confirm, are we specifically one park, or are we talking about the different recreational areas within the town? Several, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just confirming it wasn't one specific one we were referring to. Okay.
So generically?
Yeah, generically. So as Angelique said, it's not specifically a county issue on their own, but I think the starting point is to understand what the community wants from its park. So it's probably a good place to start by asking people actually what they want from their park. And that's the older community, but also the younger generations coming through to really fully understand. I wouldn't want to make assumptions that I know, even though I have teenage children, what they want from their park. So I think that would be a starting point. And then obviously match that to assess where we are with the facilities we currently have in those parks, and therefore where areas can be improved upon. I think one of the challenges has been in the past, certainly on the football cricket pitch area, has been vandalism sometimes, to the pavilion. So, we've got different issues there, but that will often come out of boredom, where people aren't accessing the facilities at the park that they wish to access. So that's probably the way I'd go about it. But certainly, yes, accessing grants once we know the provision that the community wants. So it's got to be built in actually, understanding what this community wants. It comes back to that word. It's a very simple word, but understanding it. Our job, if we're elected up here, is to understand from you as the community and the range. We don't see as many younger faces in here as we'd probably like to see, and understand what they also want as the future of our community.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll throw it back to the floor. We've got two more questions potentially, but if there's anybody in the room who would like to ask a question. Yes, sir.
I would like to ask my question to the chair.
Yes.
Rather than the candidates. Anthony, you mentioned the most important word earlier, commitment. And I want to see our councillors committed to the job. I think that's really important. Very good views, but unless you're committed to doing it, there's no point in being elected. The three of you tonight here, I feel, are committed, and any of them could or would get my vote. But I am concerned about the two candidates who are not here tonight. One of them has submitted answers, which is very good. But can you explain why it is that the fifth candidate has not only not attended, but not submitted answers, even though he's been given a couple of weeks, or she has been given a couple of weeks?
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I can't. I just received an email saying, no, I'm afraid I won't be able to attend. So I'm sorry, I can't.
I think my question has been answered.
Okay. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, Mark.
In the past 2 years, there have been a number of people and in this area, in a sort of area with older generations in, and they've gone on some of the issues, which I have no doubt is not on the people themselves, but I feel that aftercare and the services within that time. Could you look into a way of improving the quality of water?
So these are older people, you're saying?
These are people of all ages.
Of all ages?
The area is generally the elder population within,
Yeah.
and they've had a few issues. And it's a case of a different system of letting the plan and they're active here. They've had no support to follow on now.
And that's to do with health or other types of support?
Health and mental illness, other addictions.
Right.
I'm quite happy to take that.
Okay, if you're happy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when it comes to housing in any town, the councillors, as in us and town council, have no say as to who is housed in the area. That comes under the housing specialists at County Hall. They are employed officers, and we have no right to argue with them about who they place in town, as they are the qualified professional. They don't, from what I can see, seem to consider whatsoever the suitability of the person for the area. If there's a space and they're homeless, they get put in it. That is Welsh policy. If it doesn't matter where they've come from, if they're in Wales or in our case in Powys at that time, they will be put in a vacant lot, basically. They are visited every week, at least once a week, by the housing officer, who is supposed to also look after the range of people that are around them and talk to them. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I'm afraid during COVID, it's been particularly difficult because none of the services have been open. There hasn't been the coffee morning at the com for them to come to and to meet a professional that might help them there. There hasn't been the free lunches. One gentleman came to town with just a radio with absolutely nothing else. And you can't help but feel sorry for this particular person, but it doesn't give them the right to inflict their problems onto other people. And because there were no services in town able to help them, it just spiraled out of control. And this has happened on more than one occasion, I'm afraid. But as I say, as a councillor, us here, and well, you're on the council, you as councillors cannot interfere in any way with anything that the council officers do or the police do. It is completely different. Sorry, that's the nearest I can say to explain
I
the
think
problem.
Mark's question is more to do with the support they receive.
Well, there hasn't been any, that's the problem, because of COVID.
Yeah.
Well, at the com has a Tuesday morning help morning for people to come in, and there's numerous different charity groups and council groups that come in to provide that care, so they should be able to be funneled in the right direction.
Mark, am I right in thinking your question was more at the county level?
Yes, because in relation to good service, which I don't dispute.
Yeah.
But unless you can make the people come to look well, is there a follow-up with professional services that can monitor better?
No. Basically, the answer is, I'm sorry. I wish I could say yes, but we haven't got, no, there isn't. The housing officer is the only one that visits them.
Okay, would either of you? Okay, sorry.
Can I just add to it? I mean, Angelique's been in position, so she's in a better position.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
To maybe
I wasn't
answer.
trying
No,
to-
you are.
just-
No, I accept
yeah.
that. There's not a problem at all. I accept that. I think just looking at it from a new set of eyes, who doesn't have Angelique's experience of working with the housing officer and the locating of those, but having worked in social services or with social services and worked with challenging individuals as well, I would come at it this way as well. Ultimately, you know, it's knowing that there's a problem. So community again has a responsibility to identify that there is a problem. And I came across this on my door knocking in the Bigardi ward. I won't say exactly where, but I came across somebody who was quite happy to explain to me about a very challenging individual who had a wild sort of dog who was chasing other people around the place. And it was a real challenge for quite considerable time, too long really, that there was no intervention to make, to improve the experience of the neighbours of this individual, because it was making their lives hell, if I'm honest with you. They were quite vocal and expressive in how their lives was made really bad, and other neighbours as well.
Yeah.
So clearly there has to be, we would still be a voice. Now, I don't think any of us can promise that we would be able to solve that, but we would certainly be a voice that you could come to, whether that's directly because you have our numbers and our emails, or whether that was from just meeting you, or whether that's through the various community councils feeding that back up. And certainly representation, I think we'd all agree that we would make representation to at least encourage, and that would go all the way up through to our MPs and MS, a member for Senate, if that was required. But certainly the community has that sort of responsibility to at least identify a problem. Nobody should be living in a situation where they're being almost terrorized by somebody's behavior. But it is something that we on our own can't solve with a wand, but we would certainly be involved with hopefully bringing a solution together quicker than just leaving it run and play its own course. Is that sort of maybe add?
Corinne, would you like to say?
No, I think both Angelique and Anthony have covered everything. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruth, another question from the internet.
Yeah, and could you repeat it, because we had a complaint on Facebook, they couldn't hear the...
Mark's question. I'm sorry, yes.
So the first one is, how would the prospective candidates help ensure local businesses prosper and grow?
Okay, so the question was, how would the candidates help to ensure that local businesses prosper and grow? I'll start with Corinna.
Well, 2 hours free parking would be nice. A facelift for the town would be nice as well. Could be local government grants, just painting. I think plantings would be great. Was it local? Sorry.
Local businesses.
Yeah. I think I'll leave it
How
there.
would you help them thrive?
Yes, I mean, one of the things we could do, certainly lobby for, and again, this is working with our representation at the Senate and also at Parliament, is to encourage the Welsh Government to match the English authorities' business rates, which are we're currently sat at 6,000 exemption, whereas in England, I believe it's 12. So we start paying business rates at over £6,000, whereas English businesses, small shops, so forth, start paying at 12. That's a significant prejudice against Welsh business. So I think our job is to lobby and work together again as a community, as a county council, and with our representation at higher levels, at both the Senate and Parliament, to ensure that we get an equal footing with English businesses. So that would be my starting point. But yes, accessing grants to improve their energy efficiency, encouraging tourism. We've talked about that already. There's a huge area that we could improve the tourism. I agree that we should have probably a platform, a social media platform, which is shared by all providers of accommodation, of facilities like the rally school, the shooting at Griffin Lloyd, all of those things to attract people and show, look what we provide here. Again, this is us as a community working together to bring together all the opportunities that newcomers or visitors to our area can see in an easy platform. It's not so much competition against each other, but we all benefit directly if we bring more people here. But yes, I mentioned the parking as part of my thing.
Another question, another point to add, but I will just go to Angelique and I'll come back to you if I may. Angela, local businesses, how do we help them thrive and prosper?
Well, I suppose firstly is use them ourselves rather than get online and go anywhere and everywhere else to buy what we need to buy. If we use the local businesses ourselves and encourage our friends, our families, our children, anybody and everybody to use them, it will help. At the moment, they are getting free council tax from the Welsh Government. We are lobbying them to be able to keep that because it should be coming to an end next year. We're lobbying to be able to keep that for the shops in town. Unfortunately, if we want free parking, we have to give up the free council tax, which doesn't help the top of town. It might help a few shops at the bottom end of town, but any of the shops at the top end of town will get no benefit from that whatsoever. Apparently, I'm told the central car park in town takes £38,000 a year. And if we want to have free parking, town as a whole has to make up that amount of money to pay, and for the shops to be able to keep the free council tax. So it's a bit of a juggling act. Bigger businesses, I think business breakfasts would be good. I think it would be good to have them here or in town. I mean, not necessarily here. Again, to bring in the different ministers, the different cabinet members, to talk to them about what help they can get. Yes, it would be nice to have town painted right the way through, but the thing you have to remember is those properties actually belong to somebody. They don't belong to us, and if those particular people don't want to paint them, then that is their prerogative. We can't force them to do that, obviously. We have a great people that do flowers and baskets, and the town council provide very nice tubs and baskets in town around the clock, and through the summer it looks very pretty. For me, it's getting the spaces that we've got empty filled and finding out why the people that own them aren't using them.
Okay, thank you. Corinne, you wanted to come back?
Oh, just the last point. It's a Lib Dem policy to work towards abolishing business rates for small businesses.
Okay, thank you. Tom. Okay, so the question from the floor was, given that the cost of, so it's kind of balance of the budget. So if you get free parking, there's going to be less money spent on public transport, buses especially. So what's your specific question, Tom? So you're saying, what's the candidate's choice? What if there is, if it is a 50, if it is a one or the other? Okay, thank you. Okay, in brief.
No,
Sorry.
we need more transport, not less. We have few enough buses and trains as it is.
More public transport
Yeah,
spent on the budget in favour of not.
no
Sorry,
free parking. no.
without free parking. Corinna.
I don't want to make that choice either. I wouldn't cut either.
Right.
I agree. I mean, I don't know the direct connection between the two that you're referring to, but I would be challenging the council to provide that reduction. This is 2 hours of free parking. It's not free parking permanently. It's 2 hours of free parking for visitors particularly. But I would certainly be looking to also increase provision of public transport. It's not good enough. It's as simple. So I'm not going to agree to cutting one to provide the other. I mean, I would be fighting to improve the budget for transport. Now, I understand that that can be a bigger conversation about where money is taken from to provide that, but it's certainly something that I see as a benefit to both. I see the local transport is an important thing for both tourism and local residents. And parking is important for people spot visiting and also tourists. I need to be able to answer that fully. Sorry, I think that's an important point that you've made. And I take that on board, but I would be challenging that. So.
Okay, so 50-50 and nobody wants to do.
No, it's not 50-50 at all. Sorry, someone cut me off.
Nikki.
know that it's an effort to encourage local people to use you get to sit out to the scene and explain to you how long you are. If you're more than half an hour, you don't pay for your parking. If you go over that time,
Okay, so
it's a sort of half method. I would say, £2
okay, so from the floor for those on the streaming who weren't able to hear, it not specifically a question, is that right? More a commentary. Yeah. So one of the members of the audience has recently lived next to the central car park and says that in her experience, tourists are very happy to pay. The people who are punished are the people who just want to come and get a pint of bread and could get a ticket even though they're in the car park for 15 minutes or so. Is that fair enough? Okay. Do we have any more questions? Ruth.
Sorry about this. A question from a parent. What would you do to provide post-16 education in our area again and boost high school numbers so that more subjects can be offered to our pupils? This year's option choices at our local high school were 3 boxes of 3 subjects, no foreign languages due to the funding of students allowed. This lack is extremely detrimental to the future of our youth.
Okay, so this is a question about education, post-16 education and the lack of opportunities for young people once they've reached 16. And there was an anecdotal tale of somebody in a local school who wasn't able to access foreign languages because of the cost of providing the teaching and lack of demand for low numbers. Yeah. And the question was, what would the candidates do to seek to ameliorate that situation? Let's start with Corinna.
I think it's very difficult. An awful lot of people are going, post-16 are going to Hereford or Shrewsbury. They build up, those places have built up a really good education. The Lib Dems want to provide those extra subjects such as foreign languages via Zoom. It's not as good as having teachers. But right now I know that there's one physics teacher in 3 schools, between 3 schools, including Llanidloes and Newtown. There's just not enough specialist high school teachers, and you just need to build up the quality, and it'll be slow, I think.
Angela.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably going to be the answer is going to be Zoom, isn't it? I have a son. Well, I have 2 sons actually, but I have one 17-year-old that does most of his classes by Zoom from Newtown College. It's not just post-16, it's post-11 really, it's the secondary school. We have a member of the audience that worked in the secondary school for a little while, or a long while, many years. And the difficulties is getting really, really good qualified staff. And we don't want to compromise and not have really, really good qualified staff. They've got to be the best that we can have for our children. And unfortunately, if that means that one lad in Newtown wants to take Spanish and nobody else does, they should be able to take that option by joining in that lesson at another school. I don't think it's practical to ship them by car, which was the first option, but now everybody is so used to working on Zoom or Teams or whichever particular forum they work on. I think it's a great opportunity that we should be able to offer that. My son was the same. My son only had 3 boxes with 3 options in, and he didn't like any of the options in any of the boxes. So it was dreadful, but the teenagers tend to be a bit like that anyway. But I think it's going to be a Zoom. It's going to be a Zoom answer. The way that education is taught to anybody, I think, has to be relooked at. so that it is the best for each individual child. And then if you want to do Spanish, you join a Spanish class. That class might be taught from Hereford College, but you get to do that subject that you want to do. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the important thing, that if that child wants to do that subject, they should be able to access it. And if it means teaching in a different way, then we're going to have to adapt, because we can't get the teachers.
Okay, so remote learning, you think is going to be
Well, it's going to
part of the mix?
Yeah, it's going to be in the mix.
Anthony?
I think the first port of call is certainly to ensure that schools have highly qualified and motivated teachers. That's the first port of call. We have to ensure that John Beddoes and other schools, secondary schools and primary schools are filled with the best teachers. And this comes back to this whole idea of communities. How do we attract teachers of high caliber to come here? Well, it's an attractive community, but if we start losing facilities and services, it becomes less attractive. So it's a cyclical event we have here. And we have to ensure, we have to stop the rot of our services. This is the first and foremost challenge for everybody sat on this panel, and even yourselves, to elect the members who will fight for this community to ensure that it is attractive to attract GPs, nurses, teachers, social workers, professionals of all types. So that's the starting point. I'm not against new technology. I think that there certainly is room for technology to be used. For instance, if you said if the opportunity to do certain subjects is limited, I will say this, that I believe from the syllabus across the whole of the UK, that language is no longer a compulsory subject. I think that's a shame, actually. All my children learn either Spanish or French, in addition to obviously English. But the challenge is if you've just got, Welsh as well. But if you've got just one person wanting to do another language, it could be German. You know, how do we provide that to allow them access? I think what's the priority? Is it the access to a Zoom facility to learn that another college without actually physically going there? It's a difficult compromise, that, because in-person learning is the best. That's it. The last 2 years of the pandemic has shown that. I saw my 3 children do distance learning on Zoom, and some of it was okay, but a lot of it was lacking. It's the communication with their fellow peers and so forth. So I think the challenge is to try and deliver it in person. But I do agree that maybe there will be times where, if we want to offer a full range of subjects, that we may have to look at modern technology to assist us in that provision.
Okay, thank you very much. I see from looking at this that we've overrun the hour and a half that I've allowed for this meeting. Unless there's one more pressing question.
I'm going to go in order. So the next one is, will the respective town councillors undertake to work with the town council in full in respect of communication and cooperation with and surrounding areas?
So the question is, will the prospective county councillors, if elected, work closely with the local community councils? I think if we can keep the answers very brief.
Yes.
With both councils, absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Yes, imperative.
As much as possible, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question?
We've all heard of the cost of living crisis. What are the candidates' views on council tax increases over the past 5 years and the next 5 years?
Okay, we've all heard about the cost of living crisis that is engulfing the country. What are the county councillors' comments on the council tax rises over the last 5 years and the prospects for further rises in the next 5 years? Is that right? That was the question?
Right.
Usually.
I've always voted against them. I think that we need to have lower council tax. I voted this year for a non-rise in council tax.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and we'll do the same again.
And nonetheless, the Conservative Independent Administration did vote through a recent increase of 3.9%. The council tax has gone up over 26% over the last 5 years. The Lib Dems and Plaid tried to keep the council tax down to 0 for this year using resources gained from Welsh Government grant.
I just put that right. It wasn't all the independents that voted it through.
Okay,
The group that I'm in voted against,
Okay.
all 12 of us.
all right.
Okay, thank you. Clarification.
Okay. Am I on? Well, my position would be obviously to be looking as a part of the Conservatives to try and ensure that we give good value for money. That's the key word here. I've not been part of the council previously. I accept that the Conservatives, along with independents, have increased the council tax. But certainly if I was to be elected, lucky enough to be elected, I would be challenging the whole council to provide value for money and to make clear the priorities of the council and to have a clear funding pathway for that. So if we were in the position where we needed to increase the contributions from the community, then that was clear as to why and what the benefits were going to be. I think the communities can buy into an increase, even in a challenging situation, if people understand the return on investment. What are you getting for your money? That's the key word. You know, what are you getting back? So the challenge is for the council to be clear and understand what the community wants, and then to communicate that back to the community. I think that's the key position.
Okay. Another question, please.
Knighton has lost its banks. The town council is fighting against Welsh Community Bank in Knighton. Would the new candidate help to support that?
Okay, Knighton has lost all its major high street banks in recent years. The town council is striving to create a community bank in their town council offices. Is this a position that will be supported by the candidates? I wonder what the answer is going to be.
Yes, if they ask me.
Yes, if possible, yes.
I think another option to the post office as a banking facility is key. I mean, we're all in that transition where we're all learning to use internet banking, but I'm still at the age, and a lot of us are, where we like a physical bank to go into. So yes, I would support that.
Okay, thank you.
Another one was about the parks.
Have we had? I think we've had a question about parks.
Another one I'm going to was, what did the town council have in mind to encourage and get the younger generation to be more active?
That's a question for the town
That's
council.
fine, yeah.
We've had a lot from the candidates about other areas and Paris as a whole, which of them will vary like the Knighton area, just before the Paris we live in.
It's difficult to paraphrase that for the online. The candidates have spoken more broadly about Powys, for which they will be county councillors, but how will they help, particularly the communities for which they are elected, rather than
I think if I can come in, I think actually broadly, I think all three of us have agreed that we are elected for this ward, Knighton and Beguiled. Let's make that clear, Beguiled included, and that's a new change. Certainly when I've been knocking on doors in Beguiled, they've been keen to ensure that we represent them as well as Knighton. And I think we all agree that that's exactly what we do if elected. I think, you know, that's our first and foremost priority, but obviously you've got to work often in collaboration with other council members, to achieve the various issues you want to achieve. So I think, you know.
Could you refresh me with the question?
Right, sorry. The question was, the candidates have been speaking more broadly about their roles in Powys.
So I would
specifically for
Knighton and the Team Valley, and I'm very interested in the Team Valley too. Yes, both. Thank you.
So, and Angelique.
I can't remember the question.
The question was, the person watching online thinks that a lot of this conversation has been about Powys, but more specifically, I think the question is, can you assure the voters of your commitment to the specific issues for Knighton and Beguiled?
My only commitment is to Knighton and Beguiled. I have no commitment to any other area, and I have no commitment to any political party. I'm totally independent, and I will not vote on anything that I don't think is good for town. For it, I will vote against it. And yeah, all the work that I do has been and is in the local area. You know, Knighton is my home and it's where I want to succeed.
Good. So I think we may draw it to close unless there's anything more pressing. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for everybody online who's watching this, and thank you especially to the candidates. Anthony Watts, Corinna Kenyon-Wade, Angelique Williams, and the two other candidates are Bob Andrews and Christine Branford. So thank you very much. And the bar is now open.